Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Dylan Little with the Mid-Continent Public Library. This is the 26th year of the Mid-Continent Public Library's Veteran Salute, an annual tradition honoring and highlighting the stories and service of our local veterans. Going back several years, the library has taken the opportunity to record the stories of local veterans with the help of our Midwest Genealogy Center. If you joined us last year, you may have viewed our interviews with a remarkable group of local Korean War veterans. This year, we're back to work with local filmmaker Kevin Bryce to highlight a new generation of veterans, those who joined the service in the wake of 9/11. As you will soon discover, every veteran story is as dynamic as it is powerful. We are lucky to have a chance to share these Kansas City area veterans in the weeks to come. Before we turn over the focus to this group of extraordinary individuals with their stories of service, we want to preface this special program with a heads up. This presentation contains adult language and graphic descriptions of violence. It may not be suitable for all ages, and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. Can you tell me your full name and the branch of service you were served in, and also kind of the venues that you were in?
So my name is Adam Majors. You wanted to know all of the units I was with, or places I went?
Just places you went, and what branch of service you were in.
Yeah, so I was in the United States Army. I deployed to Iraq with the 1138 Sapper Company, Missouri National Guard, and went to Guatemala, to build some medical clinics and things like that. And then I served in Baghdad, Iraq in 2007, 2008, and was just all over Baghdad.
So where are you from originally, and where do you live now?
So I was born up in Platte County. So I grew up in the Parkville area, or unincorporated Platte County. And now I live down in Brookside, so haven't gone too far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So tell me, so you grew up in rural Platte County.
Yep.
And did you go to Parkville High School or one of the Platte County high schools?
Yeah, I went to Park Hill South High School. So I graduated from there in 2004. And before that, I was at Plaza Middle School. I did spend a year in Leavenworth. St. Paul Lutheran there, next to Fort Leavenworth, and then elementary school at Union Chapel Elementary.
So you're Parkville through.
Yeah, and still, I still think of that as home.
Cool. So, in visiting with you here before the camera started rolling, you said that when you were a kid, you would go to the library and you would check out books on war and all that. What made you enlist? What was your motivation?
Honestly, so these days I work as a therapist, a Jungian-oriented psychotherapist, and I really truly believe that, it was just in me from the start. From the day I was born. I don't think that there was any external factors that were necessarily the guiding force. I think it was something in me, and I remember going to the library when I was like 4 years old with my grandma, and the only thing I wanted to do is, look at war history, books about war history, Revolutionary War, Civil War, First World War, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, First Gulf War. And I remember being a little kid and knowing, I knew I would one day go to war. It was completely certain for me, so.
And what was it about that?
I have no idea. I couldn't say. It was just that, I just felt like it was part of my calling. As all I ever wanted to do was join the military.
So when did you join?
I joined when I was 17.
Wow.
Yeah, if I could go back, I might have waited a little bit or done things a little differently. But yeah, there was no holding me back. So 17, I turned 17 on October 1st of 2002, and then just 3 months later, January 13th of 2003, I was in the Army.
Okay. Did you graduate from high school, or?
I ended up doing, so the Reserves and National Guard have something what they call a split op, where you can join your junior year of high school, go to basic training, after your junior year, you come home, finish high school. And for me, I came home, did 1 semester of high school, graduated early, and then in January, when all my classmates were continuing their senior year, I went to combat medic school at Fort Sam Houston, Texas.
Okay.
And then I came back from that the day before I graduated high school. So I graduated medic school, came home, walked with my class, and then went on with Army stuff.
Okay.
Yep.
So you had, before you left high school, you had your basic training
Yep.
and all that. Was that everything? I mean, since you kind of always had that feeling like that you would serve, was it everything that you thought it would be? Was it a surprise, or what was that like for you?
It's not as fun as it looks in the recruiters commercials when you're, running on 4 hours of sleep and crawling around in the mud and, or you're too hot, too cold, soaking wet, everything's chafing and you're getting bit by bugs. It's not as fun as you think it might be, but I did enjoy it for the most part.
And so then, okay, so you're like one of the youngest probably in your unit, right?
Yeah, at that time. Mm-hmm.
At that time you were, and so you're 17, and you then right after you graduated high school, then you went off, and what did you do from there?
Well, I did some other trainings when I was in the Army, and I spent most of my time in Warrensburg. So I went to the University of Central Missouri and was there until I deployed to Iraq in 2007. And
okay.
I also did, I did the Missouri National Guard's Funeral Honor Guard. So I spent, several days a week traveling around with the Honor Guard team doing funerals of veterans around Missouri. So.
And so, what did you major in college?
Criminal justice for my bachelor's degree.
And why was that?
I thought I might be interested in law enforcement or doing some human rights work more specifically. So I imagined a bit of that, but that never really felt certain to me. So there was never anything there that really stuck, but it was more just getting a degree to have one. The plan was to get a degree, get a commission, be an officer, make it a career. Yeah.
So then in 2004, your unit was deployed to where?
2007. So
2007, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yep. So and actually it was kind of a wild ride. So I volunteered. I was in the 1141st Sapper Company, and sappers are combat engineers. Basically, Sapper Company's job is to go around and blow stuff up, either get rid of obstacles like bombs or create obstacles for the enemy. But in this war and the global war on terror, it was about getting rid of bombs. That was the primary mission. So route clearance or route reconnaissance and clearance patrols is what they called them. And but I was with the 1141st Sapper Company, volunteered to go to Iraq with the 205th Area Support Medical Clinic because they had a deployment coming up. So I volunteered to go. I show up on the day where they're doing everyone's paperwork and making sure that all your stuff is in order to deploy, and found out that they had removed me from the rolls. And apparently they were overstrength and they didn't need me. And so I was furious because by this time I'd been in for 4 years and everybody's deploying. I'm wanting to do what all my comrades are doing. And so I went back to my unit and I was like, man, they took me off the list. This is baloney. And to the NCOs that I was pretty close with in the 1141st were like, hey doc, come with us. We're going to Iraq with the 1138th. Grab your paperwork and I'll make a phone call. So they called a guy who ended up being my future platoon sergeant, and they called him and they said, hey, do you have a spot for a medic? And they're like, yeah, we only have 2 medics. We need at least 4. So have him get in line. And 2 weeks after that, I was at Camp Bullis, Texas, doing basically kind of like a train up for medics. So they want all the medics, of course, to be very sharp before they head back into action. So they're just doing like a train up, getting refreshed on skills, getting the latest information from the battlefield, getting introduced to new technologies, things that we might need to know once we get in theater. So did that for, I think that was about a month, and then went from there to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, joined up with my unit with the 1138 Sapper Company, and then the adventure began.
So you said that you were criminal justice and you major, and you'd thought about perhaps being in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So and did you kind of choose? I don't, as much as you can choose anything
Mm-hmm.
in the military,
Mm-hmm.
but did you request or to be a medic, or was that something that was assigned to you, or
Yeah.
how did that work?
So the day I went to MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Station, the day I went to MEPS, they had my ASVAB score, and I scored a 91, and I wanted to be a grunt. I wanted to do something in combat arms. And they're like, yeah, sorry, we don't have any of those jobs available today. And I don't know if that was true or if it had something to do with my score. I have no idea why those jobs weren't open, because I think they're always open. And they basically said, like, look, you can be a medic, a crane operator, or like fuel supply, And they knew, because of the conversation I just had with them, I think they knew that the only job I was going to pick out of those three was going to be a medic. And so they're like, or you could go through MEPS again and come back at another time and see if there's a different job open then. And I was like, I'm not going through this again, because it's a really long, miserable day. And I was like, I'll be a medic. So I kind of settled on it, and I was like, that's probably about as close as I'm going to get to what I want.
Okay, and that's as close as you were going to get to just being a grunt.
Yep.
Then,
Yeah.
Right. But it also kind of fits into your thought of maybe being in kind of that first responder role then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So so you're with a group of soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
a unit that blows things up.
Yep.
So as a medic,
Yep.
what do you do in that role? And was
Yeah, it was basically.
there lots to do?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. It was, so route clearance, the route clearance mission is undoubtedly one of the most dangerous roles in Iraq or Afghanistan, and especially for where we were. So when we were in Baghdad, our job was to clear all of the main supply routes, which is where 95% of the bombs are probably. And there's a lot of reasons that is. One being that the enemy wants to have like a good clear line of sight to where their bomb is sitting, and they also want to have some distance so that they can get away or not be detected. But when they set off those bombs, they don't want to be anywhere near it. And in the neighborhoods, on smaller streets, they don't really have the line of sight. They don't really have the ability to get distance. And there's not a lot of mounted patrols. Like, you don't have a lot of vehicles rolling down those streets. They're more dismounted, And also, a lot of these people don't want to blow up their own neighborhoods. And so most of the IED action, or improvised explosive device action, is on the MSRs, which our job was to clear. So we spent all of our time basically driving about 10 miles per hour down these roads, looking for bombs. And the intelligence would work with the battalion, or the intelligence folks within the battalion would do an analysis to figure out where the bombs are most likely to be during any given day. And so they collect a lot of data about where the IEDs are going off, when they're going off, what kind of IEDs they are, what kind of damage they're doing. And that's, they send us to those spots, and they give us the intel about what we should be on the lookout for, and we go out and try to find the bombs before they blow up. And, a lot of times the bombs are designed to hit a route clearance patrol. So because we're really slow moving, that we're very intentional about finding those bombs. So a lot of times they would intentionally target us. And other times not. Other times the IEDs are EFPs, and an EFP is an explosively formed projectile. It's a very, very dangerous type of bomb, because the projectile that comes out of it is going to go through pretty much anything. Our vehicle's not going to stop it. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, as the medic, my job is first and foremost to try and make sure nobody gets hurt. So like everybody else, I'm looking out my window looking for bombs. So we're driving along, and you're just doing the same thing everyone is doing, which is looking for danger. And then in the moment when the action happens and something goes boom, I put my gloves on and wait to hear if somebody's hurt or not. And if somebody's hurt, I get out and take care of them.
Okay. So in these stories that I've heard, in a lot of our interviews, it seems like there's a lot of, you just described, trying to get in with a unit and just being, it sounds like that the Army is very organized yet very chaotic.
Yeah.
So you found yourself really scrambling to get with this unit that
Yep.
you eventually joined.
Yep.
And you went from somewhere in Michigan or Wisconsin to where were you deployed from there?
So we went straight from Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, to Kuwait. We expected we might be in Kuwait around a week or a couple weeks, and I think I was in Kuwait for like 48 hours. So you have like this very quick little stay in Kuwait, and then one day my squad leader came to me and said, like, pack your shit, you're getting on a plane sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours. And then they woke me up in the middle of the night and said, grab your stuff, we're going. So they don't really tell you much. They hand you some, and then they hand you ammunition because you don't have any ammunition until up to that point, give you a magazine, and they put you on the airplane.
And then where'd you go from there?
So got on the C-130, this pretty unforgettable moment, I'll never forget that day. But got on the C-130, flew into Baghdad International Airport. We landed on the tarmac, and right after we filed off the plane in a single file, and I was the second to last person off the plane. The only person behind me was my buddy Mike McMillan. It was his second tour to Iraq. And right as I'm walking off the plane, in the distance, I just heard a boom, 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 boom. And each one got a little bit louder. And we were really not in any danger, but it was, probably about 300, 250 meters away, which is a big distance. This is not, not a life-threatening experience. But when your wheels down in a combat zone for the first time, it is definitely a wake-up call that you're in a whole nother world, that you have officially arrived in a place where people are going to try to hunt and kill you, and there's no guarantees. So, I think I remember having a bit of the anxiety and jitters start to set in, and then, as we're walking off the tarmac and all that, just kind of looking around, and you see the bunkers, the old aircraft bunkers where Saddam had his probably fighter jets and stuff stored, that are completely caved in or blown apart from when the war began. But it's just, it's like you're walking into history, So I'll never forget that. We drove from there to Camp Liberty. It's all in the same complex. So you have this big complex. You got Camp Liberty, I think Camp Victory, these bases that are basically one mega base in Baghdad. So we headed over to Liberty, where our unit was stationed, or the place that we called home for the next year. And we did move around a little bit. So a lot of times we'd get called out to go run missions other places in Baghdad. So there were some routes that were especially dangerous. And whenever we'd run those, we'd go stay elsewhere, just because you don't have time to drive from Camp Liberty to go up to Pluto and come back a lot of times, because when those routes got really hot, you needed to take your time on them. And so the amount of time to get back and forth just didn't make sense. It's like they wanted you to come up there, stay there, run that route, make sure it's clear, and then when your time is done, for a couple days, then you come back to
because
Liberty.
You were going to have to go back about as slow as you came.
Exactly.
Right. So if you were going back and forth, it was almost like
These are 12-hour road trips, and you're driving in one city.
One city, and then they're building
Yep.
bombs right behind you
Exactly.
as you're going through.
That's their intent. Yeah, a lot of times. So a lot of times, and they're not stupid. I mean, these bombs are extremely sophisticated. They place them with an unbelievable amount of intention. So they're putting them there to kill people, and usually they're trying to target a specific type of vehicle. So they're putting it someplace with an angle that they know is going to hit people at about a certain height. So the distance that the bomb is placed from the road, the angle at which it's set, all of that is specifically designed to kill somebody. And if they've built a bomb to hit somebody in a different kind of vehicle, they're going to wait until that kind of vehicle comes by before they set it off. So a lot of times they wait till we roll by. After we've gone by, they come out, they put the bomb down, and then they go for the unit after us. Yep.
So it was just, what's it like to go through and know that, you know, the work that you just did is being replaced, right?
Yeah.
And just that, I can't imagine the constant stress of that.
You know, I turned 22 when I was over there.
Okay.
And for a vast majority of the time over there, it was just a job, and you're young and full of piss and vinegar. You think you're a lot tougher than you are, and eventually that kind of gets shattered. But when I was there, I didn't worry about that too much. You know, we just tried to do our absolute best. After I came home, I did learn that one of my really good friends from combat medic school was killed when I was over there, and he was killed on a route that we would have cleared. So it's like, you know, and I don't know, I don't have a record of all my missions, but, you know, I did find myself thinking, like, you know, undoubtedly a patrol from my battalion would have cleared that route any day. I mean, those routes are getting cleared pretty much every day by someone in our battalion. And I did find myself thinking, you know, what if? You know, what if? And sometimes, you know, in the past I have wondered how many we missed, how many people died because we couldn't find them. So yeah, I mean, that is something that's stuck with me a little bit, but for the most part, you know, I mean, we found a shit ton of bombs. We were chosen to lead the assault during the Battle of Sadr City, which was March to May of 2008. Some of the heaviest fighting of the entire war. There was more tank rounds fired during those 3 months than there were the entire rest of the Iraq War and in Afghanistan combined. So pretty fierce fighting. And, you know, some of those days we'd find, you know, 8, 10, 12 bombs. I think one day we found like 18 bombs or something crazy like that in like a 100-meter stretch. So and that was on Route Gold during the Battle of Sadr City. You know, and one of the things that sticks with me is we were working with one of the tank platoons from 464 Armored with the 3rd Infantry Division. And at the end of that day, we took a couple of hits, and we had to head out of there and go get new vehicles, and just like basically you get a break from the mission. And we would pull out, and then another engineer unit would come in and put the concrete wall into place while we slept. So I'd do that for a couple hours. We'd sleep for a couple hours, and we'd come right back and clear another 100 meters or however far you could get. And but I'll never forget one of those guys coming over the radio and saying, "Hey, Iron Claw." He was like, he said, "Hey, Iron Claw." He's like, "You all just saved a lot of butts today." He's like, "Good job." And you know, I mean, undoubtedly we did. You know, it's like we went through a lot of shit. You know, got hit a lot. And it was a very tough mission, but you knew that every time that we got hit by something, or we found something, the chances of somebody else going home were a lot greater. So it's like every time we get hit, our chances of getting killed in those vehicles is much lower than like if a Humvee gets hit. I mean, those guys are fucked if they get hit. They're dead. Could kill the whole crew.
Kind of going back, so you get there, it's you realize it's a war zone. What do they do to prepare you, or did you just hit the ground running?
Well,
going in,
we'd been training. I mean, we'd been training really for years. Like we'd been training for years. But when you get there, when we got to Baghdad, they had to spend, I think, like a week or 10 days in what they call the Task Force Iron Claw Academy, and that's an academy that everybody doing route clearance in Iraq had to go through. And so the reason why is that in Baghdad, we're basically fighting everybody and we see everything. So we're fighting Al-Qaeda in Iraq, you're fighting Hezbollah in Iraq, you're fighting the Jaish al-Mahdi, which is a Shia militia that's part of the Saudist movement. And they all have different tactics. And so we see everything, we fight everybody. And in Baghdad, it's like basically like you're getting things that in other parts of the country they might only get this thing or that thing. So we're having to be extremely adaptable, and that when you run certain routes, you're looking for one thing, you're fighting one group of people, you run a different route, you're experiencing different threats and a different enemy. And so at the Task Force Iron Claw Academy, they're basically teaching you everything. This is what you look out for, this is what the enemy does, this is everything you need to know. So we spent 10 days doing that, and then we do right seat, left seats for a few days, which got cut short for us. And
what's that?
Right seat, left seat is where the first time that you go out on a mission, it's basically like one of our guys, one of the new guys in each truck. And so it's getting about 6-7 people exposure to running the mission, while everyone else running the mission is the unit that's been running it for the past year.
Okay.
So you've got like all these experts and then just like a couple of new guys, about one per truck, maybe 2 per truck. And the next time you run a mission, now maybe there's 2 new guys per truck and 3 of the guys that have been there for a year. And then the next time you run a mission, maybe now it's only 2 of the guys that have been there for a year, but 3 of the new guys. And so you start to just kind of get integrated, and it's trial by fire, literally. And I'll never forget this either, but our very first mission by ourselves was not supposed to be our first mission by ourselves. And the lieutenant, whose name I remember but will not say, from the unit we were replacing, skipped out on the last mission. So we got tasked to go clear Route Grizzlies, which is the western border of Sadr City. And when he found out that's where we were going on mission, he did not go. And I don't blame him either, because he knew what we were getting into. He knew it was going to be nasty. And I think if I was the guy who had been there for a year, there's no fucking way I'm going to get in a truck and go out on a mission to some place like that with like 25 brand new guys who have no idea what they're doing. So he bailed, he didn't show up, he did not go on that mission with us, and that was our first mission by ourselves in Baghdad. And sure enough, we got ambushed, had two IED Stryker vehicles, or actually EFBs, and took some small arms fire, and that was kind of like our baptism into combat.
And so if you were all new,
Yeah.
how did that, did you just find that you were all working together, or did how does that work when everybody's new to the party?
Yeah, we're all new, and we aren't too, because my platoon sergeant had done 3 tours.
Okay.
All of our squad leaders had done at least 2 tours. Many of the team leaders had done at least 1 or 2 tours. even some of the lower enlisted, some of the specialists had done, a tour.
They hadn't just necessarily done this particular
they hadn't done
mission, this particular work.
Yeah, they hadn't done, they'd done this mission, but not in this neighborhood.
Okay.
Which is a very big difference.
Okay, because they may have been on one of those that they only
Yep.
were really concentrating on one
Bingo.
sort of device as opposed to every sort of device.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And the enemy had evolved rapidly. That the enemy that they would have fought, 18 months prior, so a lot of them had just deployed the year before, or 18 months before, or 2 years before. But when they came back, it was a brand new ball game. So a much fiercer, more advanced enemy with greater capabilities. Everything had changed. Our vehicles had changed. We had new equipment, new technologies. It was a different war. 2 years later, it was a completely different war.
So they may have come in, or much earlier, maybe been in and out for 2 years, but
Yep.
that's just how fast things were progressing.
Yeah, and most of those guys, their previous tour had been, 18 months or 2 years earlier, and they were running route clearance missions out on like Tampa and Sword, so out west of Baghdad, where, undoubtedly, there's a risk. They did lose soldiers, and it was a dangerous mission. Being in Iraq is dangerous, especially during those war years. But we basically were like, we were in the majors. That mission that they had done before was like level, 6 out of 10 on the danger scale, and we were like 10 out of 10.
Okay.
This is the most dangerous mission you could do.
Okay. And you were just there right off the bat.
Yep.
So, as a medic,
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you were kind of in dual. You had a dual role because you said, along with being the medic, you were right there with everybody else looking for the devices,
Yep.
right, for the bombs.
Yep.
And then you had to shift gears.
Yep.
And take care of anybody that was injured.
Yep.
What is that like? Because did you have? Were you ready for that?
Oh,
or
yeah.
You were ready for that.
Yeah.
You had been trained that you
Yeah.
would be doing. You were probably how many medics were with a group?
Just one of us.
That was just you.
Yeah, so when I ran out with my platoon, usually there's like somewhere between like 19 and 26 of us out on a mission, and I was, 22 years old, 21, 22 years old, turned 22 early on in that tour. But yeah, at 22 years old, I was, the sole lifeline for those guys if they got hit. So, but yeah, and I did everything they did. So for a couple of years, I'd been, whenever we had training, whatever those guys were doing, I was doing. Okay. If they're doing crew serve weapons training, I'm doing crew serve weapons training. If they're learning how to tie knots with det cord, I'm learning how to tie knots with det cord. If they're at the demo range blowing shit up, I'm at the demo range blowing shit up. So, it's like I by the time I went to, and I've been doing this for years. I knew more about, with some of the lower enlisted guys, some of like the privates, I knew more about their job than some of them did. A lot of times I'd be loading the radios in the morning or showing somebody how to check the headspace and timing on a 50 cal, So, I had a lot of experience, compared to some of the young guys when we first got there.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
And that first mission, when we got ambushed, I ended up on the 240 Bravo. So the gunner had to come down, and I had to get up on the gun. I didn't have to pull the trigger, thankfully, but I was ready for whatever happened.
You had to be ready.
Didn't have life and death for all of us.
Because really, you really are out by yourselves. There's no one that's going to come and save you.
Nope.
In any one of those, when you went out, any one of those missions.
Yeah, and we did call for help more than once in different situations, air support, stuff like that. But if you're really in it, you have to be ready. The platoon cannot afford to have a truck go down and not have everyone ready to respond. Everybody had to be able to pick up the slack if there was any.
So after that first mission, and you've been in the reserves, and now you're serving in Iraq. Mm-hmm. Are you still? Is this still kind of what you thought it would be? What you had kind of always thought you would be doing, or kind of had a yen to do?
Yeah, I think the excitement remained, and I was like really. I think I was pretty motivated and feeling pretty good about the work we were doing until the last week of January in 2008. And so between January 31st and February 6th, we had 2 guys get killed, and I don't know, I think like 5 or 8 people wounded or something.
And how long had you been in Iraq by then?
About 4.5 months, I guess.
Okay.
So that changed everything. The whole unit was a different unit after that week, and and it got a lot scarier. I think the potential. I think the imagining the potential that you might not come home, or might not come home in one piece, became like it was something that just stuck with you after that point.
Not that it didn't become real, but it became, for somebody who's 20, 21 or 22, right. Your experiences began to kind of culminate or accumulate, and and you could begin to kind of see the potential future.
Yep. Yeah, that it became a whole lot scarier. It was, and we started seeing a lot more aggressive activity, especially from the Jaish al-Mahdi in northern Baghdad, and their bombs were, most of what we started to experience was like really nasty EFPs. Very dangerous bombs. I mean, even finding the bombs was like terrifying. I mean, it's more terrifying when you don't see them, but sometimes you find these bombs, and when you find them, the thing is staring at you right in the face. And I'll never forget, we found one bomb that was like extremely well camouflaged, and by the time that we had could see the direction of these cones, and it was a dual array EFP, it was aiming right into the Buffalo, right at all of us while we're sitting there interrogating this thing. And you're just crossing your fingers and hoping the thing doesn't go off, until you can get the hell out of its way. So yeah, it started to get very scary, that there was a lot of situations like that, or times where we'd get hit or ambushed, and you just hope you get out of it.
So is this day in and day out? Were there times when you were off of duty, or was this just, what was your day, what were your days and your weeks like?
God, I hardly even remember, honestly. I mean, they gave us time off, but I don't remember how often. I do remember that they would like shift. There was like shifts, and they would rotate the shifts. So if you were running like daytime, one platoon would run like daytime up to Pluto, do like the really dangerous stuff. And another platoon might be doing nights out west, fighting Al-Qaeda, which is like a joke. It was, at that time, if you got hit on sword or something like that, it was a joke. Like, we did get hit one time on sword, and like we were literally laughing afterwards, because the bomb was just some crappy bomb made out of homemade explosives. And I remember us like making fun of the guy who got hit by it, like, so it was just not the same as running up in Pluto. So like, if you got night shift on Pluto, that basically was time off. I mean, you'd go run like a 5-hour mission and come back and go to sleep. And very little risk. But if you're running Pluto, everyone's ass is on the line.
Right.
You know?
So yeah. So even if you were to run into anything on these other runs, it was like, well, that was not
Child's play.
Just child's play.
Yep.
So the level of tension and the level of just anxiety and all that was just that much lower that you could laugh about it and kind of have a gallows humor about it.
Yep. Yeah. It was not the same. And everyone knew, the command knew, that you couldn't just have one platoon stay, on the same thing. It just wasn't fair. So we all had to take our turns, doing the dangerous stuff,
Right. You can't send the same people over and over and over.
Nope. No. I mean, it would be devastating.
Sure.
It would, the people, if you left one platoon to run those harder routes, there would be nothing left of them psychologically. Within, a couple months, they'd be toast. I mean, we were toast as it was. We by the end of it, definitely took its toll on all of us.
So 4 months in, things start to change for you, and it sounds like there wasn't a big break from any kind of there was no break really from danger, even though some of these missions were child's play in comparison.
Yeah.
But how, at the end of the day, you mentioned, is that how you were able to go back again and again during that year that you were deployed there? Is that you knew that every time you went out, you were able to save lives?
That, and yeah, I mean, part of it, there's a lot of complex parts of this, but you mentioned getting a break, and we all have like a 2-week R&R. Mm-hmm. And I had my 2-week R&R starting on February 1st. So Matt Strutter got killed January 31st.
Okay.
And the next day I was supposed to go on leave, but my platoon was going out on mission, and there was no way I was gonna let my platoon go out while I missed that mission. There's no way I was gonna let them go out the day after Strutter got killed without me to run the same exact route all over again. Okay. And I didn't want to take a chance of something happening and not being there. And so I went on that mission, barely got back to Liberty in time, because when you go on a mission, you have no idea how it's going to last. You have no idea what's going to happen. But I barely got back in time to grab my stuff and then go on leave. And I didn't want to go on leave. I remember talking to my platoon sergeant about it and saying I had a bad feeling and I didn't want to go. And, and everybody talked me into it, like, Doc, you got to go. You got to go see your family. You can't do that to them. So I went, and sure enough, while I was gone, my platoon got hit really bad, and a couple times. And they went through a lot of shit in the 2 weeks I was gone. But on February 6th, they got hit out on patrol, and it killed Brad Skelton, who had actually retired from the Army and came back in specifically for that deployment. And it seriously maimed a really, really good friend of mine, good friend to this day, named Josh Eckhoff. And he lost 75% of the right hemisphere of his brain. And, barely survived, but I mean, just an absolute miracle story all the way around. But not being there was the worst thing that happened to me when I was deployed. And I had some really bad stuff happen to me, especially later in the tour. But the worst thing that happened to me was not being with them. The 2 weeks I was home were the worst 2 weeks of my life.
Because you got news of that while you were
Yeah, and I was not supposed to be told about that, but somebody made sure I knew, and I was really grateful that they did. But yeah, I got a phone call. I actually couldn't sleep at all that night. I just laid there awake the whole night, and phone rang at my parents' place where I was staying. at like, I don't know, 5 a.m. or something like that. And it was for me, which
That's
is
never
very
good.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was told that skeleton had been killed. And I just remember like breaking down and crying for, a few seconds maybe, and just like turned it off. And then I was just angry, and all I wanted to do was get home. And I was like trying to call people. I called, my unit, and I was trying to figure out if I could just go back right then and there to just get back with my unit.
So you just said
Yeah.
to get home.
Yeah,
So that was how much
yeah,
all these people meant to you.
yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to get back to them. And, I think probably one of the biggest regrets of my life was going on leave, that I wasn't there when that happened. Because those are my guys. They were my guys. That was one of my best friends. Eckhoff. And to not be there when he got hit really fucked me up. So when you ask that question about, how do you go out on those missions and how do you keep doing it? And that's how I kept doing it, is I didn't want something like that to happen again and me not be there.
Did you really, you were responsible for them as their medic.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't be there,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. And later on I got hurt during a rocket attack during the Battle of Sadr City. And I went to my platoon sergeant and I was like, I tore my labrum, and I told Sergeant Phillips, I was like, Sergeant Phillips, because we were like literally, we just got off a 13-hour mission in Sadr City. Saw some I don't really remember the night before, but I know that we had several ID strikes because I had to take 6 of my guys to the aid station to get like the military acute concussion examination to get cleared to go out again. And by the time that we were done getting our MACE exams, I laid down to go to sleep. It was 1:19 p.m. And then the attack started. We lived at this little combat outpost, and the whole thing just got blown to shit. And there was a mass casualty situation, and I was one of the only medics there. And I got hurt in the process of like getting casualties out of the building. I don't even really remember. I don't remember. I just remember I was like, when it was over, I was like, wow, I can't like use my arm, and I mean, I could use it. It just hurt like hell. I could barely move. And so we had to evac to Loyalty, or we had to evac from JSS Sadr City down to FOB Loyalty, which is like just down Pluto. And we had gotten there, and they'd gotten hit. Our sister platoon from another company was there, and they took direct hits, killed one of their guys out of Marion. And I went to the aid station. It was me and a couple other guys from my unit that had gotten injured during the rocket attack. And actually, when I was there, the guy who treated me was a medic from my platoon in combat medic school at Fort Sam 3 years earlier. And they told me, they're like, you need to go back and get an MRI or CAT scan or whatever. But it was like evident. It was like had like been dislocated. It was evident that there was something like very wrong with my shoulder. And I went and told Sergeant Phillips. I was like, I can't go. I was like, I'm hurt. He's like, Doc, you're going. And I was like, Sergeant Phillips, I can't. I was like, if something happens to someone, I am not going to be able to do my job. Like, I cannot even move my arm right now. Like, I'm not going to be able to pull someone out of a burning truck if something like that happens. And he's like, Doc, you're going. And I was like, Sergeant Phillips, I can't, And that was the first time that I chose not to go on mission. And to be honest, a lot of it was because I was terrified, but I also knew that I was no good to my guys, and I did not want to be responsible for not being able to do my job. I could not use my arm, and I didn't want those guys to be in a life and death situation and not be able to do what I had to do to take care of them. So it was like a very conflictual part of my experience again. It really messed me up. that did too. It was very difficult to do that. And I do regret that too. Like, part of me, a lot of times I'm like, God, why didn't I just go back out? Why didn't I just go back out? And then I have to tell myself, like, dude, you had a torn labrum. You were no good to your guys. You did the right thing, but still, talked about that a lot in therapy. And
Sure.
And still, it's just, very, very hard to let go of that.
Like you say, there's just a lot of things that you you remember, but you don't remember.
Yeah.
So so at this point, you're beginning to know that, that you're not a superhuman.
No.
And that you really, need to pick and choose and know your limits.
Yep.
So how much longer are you there?
Well, so I got hurt, and I basically my roommate and my squad leader, or the other two medics that are running patrols and stuff, they're like, dude, you're done. Like, this is the end for you. Probably need to go home and have surgery. Like, this is over. And but people started talking shit about whether or not my injury was legitimate, and
because
I wasn't.
Can't see it.
You can't see it.
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing. Yeah, and they didn't have technology. It was like they took an X-ray, but for me to get an MRI or CAT scan, I was going to have to go to Germany, and it was like, that's not happening. That is not happening. And so it was like 4 or 5 days after I got hurt, I talked to Sergeant Cook, and he knew everything that was going on. This is my squad leader, the head medic, and he's a staff sergeant. And I talked to him, and he knew everything, And but I was like, I will be damned if I go home, and I'll be damned if anybody's going to talk shit about what kind of soldier or medic I am. I mean, because by this time, we'd been in some heavy ambushes inside our city. I'd had platoon mates get wounded, and I'm having to get out in an ambush and go get them. So it's like, I have more than proved myself, but I'm not going to let somebody talk shit about and claim that I'm doing this because I'm a coward. So I switched platoons, and on May 7th I was back out on mission. Torn labrum, and had a week off work, and was back out doing my job with a torn labrum, and I just sucked it up, But it was like I'm sure some people would judge that for being like a flaw of character, to let your pride, convince you to do something like that. But I was not done. There's no way I was going home. There's no way I was going to end like that. And so I just sucked it up. And May 7th, I was back out on mission with 1st Platoon and running missions back up to Solder City. So May 7th, 8th, and 9th, we're up there for some of the heaviest fighting of the war. May 9th was a major event during the Battle of Solder City. We were heavily ambushed on May 9th, and we had 3 EFPs hit our trucks, and 1 hit the tanks that were up there providing security for us within the space of about 45 minutes or an hour. And it was as we had to turn around and get out of there because our lead Husky had taken a hit to the engine block, and it was dumping hydraulic fluid all over the road. And in that situation, you have to get the hell out of there, because if that truck is completely disabled and cannot move, and this is a 1-person vehicle, the person in that vehicle is basically a sitting duck, and the person either has to get out of that vehicle and you have to abandon it for the time being, which then blocks the route, which is not you cannot do that there, not because this is the front line. This is Route Gold, Battle of Solder City. And you don't want to have to get out to recover the vehicle, because there are literally bombs everywhere. And if a group of people have to get out to go hook that thing up to tow it, there's a very good chance someone is going to die.
Because they're all exposed, right?
We are exposed, and you have the whole Jaish al-Mahdi right on the other side of the street. And so you're not getting out to recover that vehicle there without someone probably dying, probably multiple people. I mean, it's not a safe situation to be in. So when his Husky took that hit, we knew that we had to get that Husky out of the way. We have to get it to a safe location so that we can recover it or abandon it for the time being or whatever. And in the midst of maneuvering him out of the way, because you basically have this like log jam of vehicles and this like one lane of roadway at this point, as we're all kind of turning around and trying to rearrange the vehicles, another vehicle got hit. And so at this point we're like, all right, we just got to get the hell out of here. We've cleared, at least 50 meters of this. Let's get out of here. Let 769, the Louisiana engineers, come up and put in the concrete wall. Let's let them come up and do their thing. We'll come back after we've got new vehicles and we'll start over. And as we were making our way out of there, the Buffalo that I was riding in took a direct hit, and one of the tanks took a hit. And a pretty fierce firefight followed, or didn't really follow. It was the whole entire time for 45 minutes or an hour, and that ended with dropping some 2,500-pound bombs on the enemy's position, the position that they were using to attack us. And it's a JDAM, which is a pretty persuasive, it's a pretty persuasive thing to do in a battle. And it's a very good way to convince the enemy to leave you the hell alone. So when the JDAM got dropped, and I think they had to drop 2 or 3, I think the first 2 landed in the roadway rather than on the building. Although I was not there for that part, because by the time the bombs hit, we were heading south on Delta. So Delta Gold intersection, we're heading south on Delta back down to the JSS to recover our vehicles. But we heard the explosions, and it was right after that the Battle of Sadr City changed. So after that event, we never experienced the kind of fighting that we had experienced the whole 3 months before that. So never again did we experience balls to the wall fighting. And shortly after that, Muqtada al-Sadr signed some kind of a ceasefire agreement with the U.S. military and Iraqi government. And it was kind of a crummy deal, actually, as far as we're concerned, because I believe that the agreement did not allow U.S. troops into Sadr City. So we all had to stay south of the wall. Only the Iraqi military was allowed to go north of the wall. And we had a lot of concerns about that basically they'd retain their weapons and everything else, and all the people that we'd been fighting would just get away. So here we go through 3 months of hell and have nothing to show for it. But it didn't really end up that way. It ended up, I think, that they confiscated like an enormous number of weapons and bombs, and that, it did change the landscape of Baghdad even, in Sadr City especially. So that was more or less the end of like legit combat, like battles. After that, all the action we saw was, like minor ambushes, so like getting hit by one EFP or one RPG or like a little burst of small arms fire, which is like what everybody experiences. So it went from like unceasing battle to, very minor engagements, which those minor engagements, that was like the most of the war. So it's still not really that minor, but minor compared to the Battle of Sadr City.
Yeah, still, it's all comparative,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But you're still injured.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
you're still in pain, but you're
Yep.
playing through it.
Yep.
So that you can be there for everyone.
Yep. I didn't have surgery until after I got home.
Okay.
Yep. So I came home and had surgery.
So during this time, then, you don't you're toughing it out.
Mm-hmm.
And where are we at in your year of deployment at this point?
That was in May, and that's very near the end. I don't actually remember, but I think that we came home in July or August.
Okay. So you arrived in
September. Yeah.
Okay, in July or August then?
Yeah. I don't really remember
exactly when.
Yeah, I remember it was summertime.
And so, I mean, what was it like to leave after all that?
I remember just having this feeling. I remember down to our last couple missions, I was one of the last people to stop running missions. Mm-hmm. So when they did right seat, left seat, I think I ran every single mission except for the very, very last one. Just because I think that they wanted like the experienced medic there with a lot of new guys, and we were running pretty hot routes. And I remember having this fear that I would get killed before. I remember thinking, there's no way I'll survive all this. I remember thinking that there's just no way that we'd make it through. And I kept thinking something bad is going to happen, which is, I think, a pretty common, pretty normal thought to have after something like that. And I remember just like thinking that something would happen and I wouldn't make it home. And then when I ran my last mission, I thought I had one more mission to run. So I thought I was on the manifest for the last mission. I'd been told I was on the last mission. And we were running to Grizzlies, which was the first mission, so the western border of Sadr City. And I was like, shit.
Yeah, so it's like you come full circle and here you are, right?
Yeah, and I remember thinking like one more time, back up to the Grizz. And I remember thinking like one more last time in combat, because there's like basically a 95% chance you're going to get ambushed if you run Grizzlies. And so I remember thinking just one more night, this is it. And then someone, and I don't remember who, but by this point we had been moved from the place we were staying to these tents, because the new unit had come over and taken over our homes. And so we're in this tent, and somebody came and they were like, hey, Doc, you don't have to go on the mission tonight. And I remember being like, what? No, I gotta go. And they're like, nope. Lieutenant Robert says you're done. Just pack your shit, go turn everything in. And I remember being like just shocked, like I made it, I'm done. No more combat missions. And then I'm like, surely I'm gonna get hit by a mortar while I'm laying here in this tent. And then I was like, maybe the plane will crash. I'm thinking like some disaster is going to happen and I'm not gonna make it. And then I did. So, yeah, but yeah, we actually got stuck in Kuwait. We went from Baghdad to Kuwait. We got stuck in Kuwait for, I don't even remember how long, weeks, I think, because of sandstorms. I think it was like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I don't really remember. But maybe it just seemed like a really long time. I think we were there for a long time. Sandstorms, and we couldn't fly out. I don't remember if it was Ali Assalim Air Base or where, but we basically ate McDonald's, and played cards in the tent. So played a lot of spades. And that was basically it. There's no, I don't remember like having books or having anything to do, any kind of entertainment, there's nothing to do.
Yeah, because you may have to leave. They may just pack you up and leave at any time.
And whenever the sandstorm clears, yeah.
Yeah, so lots of cards.
Yeah, we had like
hanging out.
one bag, one small bag I think is all we had with us at that point, like a backpack, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't really remember very clearly. And then we went to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. We were there for a couple days. And then all the guys that were heading back to Kansas City, which was basically the volunteers, were put on a bus. And, everybody else was going back to Farmington, Missouri, where the armory is. But all the guys that were going back to Kansas City were put on a bus and taken to the airport. And but I'll never forget getting on that bus and, you know, looking out the window and waving goodbye to everybody. It's like, you had this. Unbelievable year together, you know, like relying on each other entirely. And that it was just over, you know. Some of those guys I never did see again. I haven't seen them since. But yeah, it was just over very quickly. You know, one day you're on a combat mission and, you know, a month later you're waving goodbye.
And it's just over.
It's just over. And then you go home, you get off an airplane, and there's your family.
And how is that? I mean, you described just, you know, it's just boom, it's over.
Yep.
You're sitting in a tent in Kuwait waiting for a sandstorm to be over, and then you're on a bus,
Yep.
you wave goodbye, and then boom, you're back to what is normalcy.
Yeah.
But it's not, is it?
No, it's the worst thing you could ever do to someone who's 22 years old, who's just been in combat, is like send them back home. Because you're not ready for that.
You're not ready for that. What was it like? Just being home.
I went home. I didn't have a license because I lost my license when I was home on leave, driving while intoxicated. After, you know, Skelton got killed. And so I didn't have a license. But I'd have, you know, like my family member, I remember like going to like CVS for some reason, and I was like grabbing a bottle of Southern Comfort and cigarettes. And I basically sat on the front porch and just thought, you know, I had nothing else to do. And didn't really want to see anyone. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was very angry when I came home because life had just gone on, and you know, it's like you just see people going about their lives and they have no idea what the hell is going on the other side of the planet. And it's like I didn't even want to see my friends. I didn't want to see anybody, talk to anybody, do anything. So I basically like just drank and looked at pictures and videos from when we were over there and thought a lot about, you know, just thought about all the stuff that had happened.
It just plays through your mind like a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and funny enough, so flash forward from 2008 to 2015, I started working with other veterans. I started reading everything I could get my hands on. I had a huge breakdown in 2009. So my life completely fell apart a year after I got home. I started having panic attacks every day, became suicidal, went to the VA. That was worse than not getting help for me. I had an absolutely horrible experience that just made me feel even more suicidal. And started seeing a therapist outside the VA. And then I started reading everything I could get my hands on about veterans, PTSD, trauma, coming home from war. Literally read every single book, I think, that has been written by anyone of any kind of notoriety, like all the kind of, there's like a circle of experts within this area. So people like Carl Marlantes, Ed Tick, Roger Brooke, Joseph Bobrow. I can see his books, but I can't think of it. Jonathan Shea, you know, people like that. So I just read all their stuff, and I remember thinking, this is wrong, that we don't have things to help us transition. This is wrong that we don't have the kinds of therapies that we need to address problems that no one else even recognizes as existing. And so I started a nonprofit, which is still up and running today and doing its thing.
And what's it called?
So The Battle Within.
Okay.
So started out as the Warriors Hope Project, went through some evolutions, and today it exists as The Battle Within. So I think probably over 500 veterans and first responders have gone through it now. And then we also have like a program called the Frontline Therapy Network within that provides free psychotherapy to veterans, first responders, and healthcare professionals. So we do an assessment and get them paired up with a kind of therapist and the type of therapy they need to meet their specific needs for whatever they're going through. But knowing what I know today, I wish I would have had, in 2008 when I got home, I wish I would have had that program, the 5-day, and I wish that, to this day, I still think about how profoundly healing it would be if we could go through something like that as a unit. Like how much it would have meant, how much it would have changed the whole course of my life after war if there had been psychotherapists trained in the kinds of things that we do at the Battle Within to meet a unit when they get off that airplane. Because, you get off the airplane in Fort McCoy, you're holding your rifle. This thing has been glued to you. You sleep with it. It's always right next to you. You go to the chow hall with it, and then you get off an airplane and they unceremonially take your weapon from you and they put it in a box, and you go on without it, and you feel completely naked and helpless. And that was like the most ceremonial thing that happened to us when we came home. Like the unceremonial taking of our weapons. That was like the most symbolic thing we experienced. That was it.
But you're still kind of at this level of anxiety and fear and anger.
Yeah.
And they've taken away the thing that you always had with you.
To keep you safe.
Yeah. And they say, you're fine, go.
Yeah.
So when you were done and you're sent home to Kansas City, are you still, you haven't been discharged?
No, I was still in the Guard. So
you're still in the Guard, so
Yep.
you've still got to do that duty,
Yep.
right? And how is that going back to Guard duty after all that you've done?
Yeah.
That's all that you've experienced.
It was tough too. After I got home from Iraq, I was also promoted to sergeant, went to the 205th Area Support Medical Company, which is like, for me, the last kind of unit I want to be in. Like, I don't want to be in, a medical unit. I wanted to be, with all the guys. I wanted to be in a sapper company. That had become my home. I spent like over 6 years of my time in the Army with sapper companies. So it was like leaving home to go be with a unit where the culture is entirely different. It's not the same thing. So in a sapper company, at that point in time, it's not like this today, but at that point in time, it was a male-only unit. It has a very unique culture, very close-knit, and it's a brotherhood. And I went from that to, a unit where there's males and females. I hadn't done that since my first year in the Army. And I wasn't even in that unit for very long, so it's like it was a very foreign thing for me. And you go to training, and the training is almost non-existent. And it's not like real training, And I remember having a very hard time with that, because here I've just come back from extremely heavy fighting. I'm now an NCO in a unit that is not preparing soldiers for combat. And in their mind, they're thinking, well, we'll never see combat. But, you never know where your Joes are going to get orders to go. You don't know if the lower enlisted are going to get picked up to go somewhere and, do something like I had to do. And in fact, some of those soldiers did end up going on very tough deployments. And some of the people who were lower enlisted in that unit that I was in ended up going on the next deployment with the unit I had gone to Iraq with. And they went with them to Afghanistan, where quite a few soldiers were wounded and killed, and they needed to be ready for that. And I had a really hard time, keeping my mouth shut, because I was angry. I was not happy about the lack of training, the lack of preparation to send soldiers into combat. And it's like, yeah, it's a medical company. Let's just count, let's count the number of combi tubes and oxygen tubing that we have in the Connex. And it's like, you have to do that stuff. You have to do your yearly inventories. They have to be accountable for it. But it was just like, if you want these soldiers to be ready for combat, it needs to look different. So it's very hard for me to go to a different unit to accept, the Army's way of doing things in a unit where going to combat is not the thing that you prepare for.
But they need to be prepared for it.
They need to be prepared.
They could be peeled off, some of them, and be deployed.
Yeah, but what does a sergeant know?
Right.
What does a sergeant know about these things?
Who's been there and done all the things, right?
They treat you like you don't know anything.
So during this time, then you go back, you do your duty, your guard duty, and you do your weekends and your.
Yep.
Yeah, and what is it, one
1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year.
2 weeks a year.
Yeah.
And during this time, you're starting to read, and you're really kind of seeing that probably there's a better way to handle this kind of re-entry into what we call normal life, right? And so, where did you take it from there? There's a difference between reading and creating. What was that? What were those steps for you?
Oh, for me, it was just something took hold of me again.
Kind of like when you were a kid and you were going through those books and you're with about military service and all that. You kind of experienced a new focus there.
Yeah. There's that saying that fate guides the willing, and the unwilling she drags. And for the first several years, I got dragged. But I started having these really intense dreams, and I knew that the dreams had to mean something. I mean, you have these dreams, and the imagery, and the symbolism is so specific, and just trusting and that the body has its reasons, the psyche has its reasons for doing what it does. It's not a dumb animal. It has intention, that there's a purpose or an aim to what our immune system does, to what the psyche does. And in large part, it is self-healing, And when I started having dreams, I started, doing research, ran into the work of Carl Jung, and before I knew it, I was getting my second master's degree in depth psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute. So I did that from 2015 to 2019.
What was your first master's degree?
International Relations Comparative Politics.
And where was that from?
Missouri State University.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I did that like 2010, 2011. So not long after my breakdown. So I started thinking I was going to do some work in human rights, work for the State Department maybe, something like that. I was thinking that I might do something related to foreign policy or human rights. I wasn't really sure, but my anxiety made it impossible. So at that stage, 2010, 2011, 12, 13, my anxiety was so severe I could barely even leave my house most of the time.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
You could study and you could do all this, but actually putting anything into practice, holding down a job, doing anything like that, you just couldn't.
Exactly. Yeah, I wanted to believe at that stage. I was going to therapy. I went to several different therapists, and at that stage, I wanted to believe that time would heal it, or it would just magically go away, or that in therapy, that something would happen and that it would go away and I could go on with my life, But the conditions were not right for me to heal at that stage in time. So I was just overwhelmed with anxiety, couldn't leave my house. I couldn't do something like this. This would have never happened in 2000, anytime before 2015 or even 2017, I probably wouldn't have done something like this. I wouldn't have left my house at 2 p.m. to drive somewhere, Ultimately, though, when I got into studying depth psychology, got into Jungian analysis, and that's where the breakthrough happened. So once I started to work with the dreams in therapy, that ended up being the game changer. And about 2 years into Jungian analysis is when things really, really did change. So I went from having panic attacks every day to like having panic attacks like once a month, you know, and then flash forward to today, I have panic attacks like once a year, you know, or it just depends. You know, certain situations can make it challenging, but yeah, I'm not falling apart like I used to.
So you saw this obviously as it helped you.
Yep.
So you see this as a way of helping others.
Bingo. Yeah.
And so that becomes your new focus.
Yep. Yeah, especially after reading everything that I'd read, and I went to a similar program out in California, which was highly unethical. So it had some really great things that were that I thought, this is wonderful, this could be great. But then there was these other things that were like highly unethical. No therapist in their right mind would ever allow those things to be taught or practiced, and they were doing it. And so I took the good things that I saw at that program, which did genuinely help me, and then all the other stuff I scrapped and took the lessons from my own analysis, the lessons I gained from reading people like Carl Marlantes, Ed Tick, Jonathan Shea, and I kind of culminated it, and there was this thing that was just born out of me. You know, it was this thing that, you know, I didn't have an option. It was coming through me whether I liked it or not.
You just had to do it. It was like there was no choice.
Yeah, it's like I got pregnant, and 9 months later, this baby's coming.
And it's like there's no stopping it now.
There's no stopping it.
Yeah. So, so the battle within, and then Warrior's Ascent is the 5-day.
Well, Warrior's Ascent was
help me out there. Give me a timeline there.
So, October of 2014, we ran our first 5-day program as the Warriors, or I'm sorry, it was a 3-day program in October of 2014, and it was the Warriors Hope Project.
Okay.
And we ended up rebranding to Warriors Ascent.
But you kind of were the architect of some of these programs based on the one, like you say, you took the good things out of what you had experienced, built on them.
Yep.
But you're a practicing psychotherapist today.
Yep.
And you work with veterans and just civilians and first responders.
Yep.
Did you ever see your life taking that turn?
No, and just like being a medic, you know, it's like it was a role that kind of chose me in a way. Like I didn't really have any real actual other options. It was just the role that it's like the fates handed it to me. And the same thing with the psychotherapist, the dreams are kind of what drew me into it. And like nothing else in the world, you know, once that kind of grabbed a hold of me, nothing else in the world really even, there was no passion in anything else. So, you know, once I became aware of that world, there was no turning back. So, but yeah, I work with anybody and everybody at my private practice. I do have a handful of veterans that I work with there, which is really meaningful. And then I work about a quarter of the time with the Battle Within. So I do a lot of the background stuff in terms of I do all of our clinical interviews for the Frontline Therapy Network to help people get hooked up with the right kinds of therapists. And then I do like all their survey stuff. So when we're doing our assessments of how the programs, both the 5-day and the Frontline Therapy Network, when we're assessing their impact on trauma symptoms, depression, functioning, all that, I'm the one that does all of that nerdy stuff. So, yeah.
Everybody needs a nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but now you live in Brookside and you're married and have a young child.
Yep, almost 14-month-old.
Almost 14-month-old.
Yeah, and he's, you know, I'd always wanted a kid until, you know, by 2012 or so, 2012, 2013, 2014, I started thinking I would never be able to have kids. I just didn't think I'd ever be healthy enough to have kids or to take care of a kid. And thank goodness to like my own analysis and the breakthroughs I've had. You know, my wife talked me into it, and you know, our little boy Theo is probably the best thing that ever happened to me, really. So him and my wife are just amazing. So I feel very fortunate to have the life that I have. You know, especially, you know, as a combat veteran, I feel really fortunate to have what I have, because I think that I'm probably, unfortunately, in a very, very small minority of combat veterans who are, you know, able to really feel like they're free of that. You know, and I've that stuff stays with me, but not like it did before. It used to haunt me. Now, you know, it's, you know, part of my own mythology. You know, it's like the thing that brought me to who I am today. So.
But your work, obviously, you feel like you can help others.
Yep. Yeah. Very satisfied with everything, the way it all went down.
Is there anything in this interview that I didn't ask you that I need to know, or you want to share?
No, I think that covers like all the main things. I appreciate having the opportunity to tell the story. You know, Carl Marlantes, in his book What It Is Like to Go to War, he has this line where he says, you know, when the child asks, what is it like to go to war, to remain silent is to keep from coming home. And you know, he shares this Navajo story, a Navajo myth about these twin brothers that essentially go to war. It's a little bit more than that. It's mythologized, but they go to war, they go to battle, they come home, they're changed. They go through this period of isolation because their tribe is threatened by them. They kick them out of the tribe, and they go off and they meet Sky Woman, who teaches them to sing about the things they've been through, or in other versions to do sand paintings to tell their stories. And that after they're able to sing their song or tell their story to the tribe, they're able to come back home. And I think that, you know, like we all have our ways of doing that, but without a doubt, there's this code of silence in the veteran community where we're not supposed to talk about the things we've done or what we've been through, and that if you're talking about it, you're probably lying, there's a lot of that. Like I'll hear some bullshit war stories, and I know a bullshit war story when I hear one. Like it is very easy to sniff it out. But you know, I think it's really important for veterans to tell their stories, for people to understand the impact that war has on people. And I'm glad to have this opportunity just to get it out there.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come, and we really appreciate it, because we think it's important to record the history and you know, for now and for the future. So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you're interested in learning more about this program, please visit mymcpl.org/veteran salute. If you're a veteran or concerned about one, there are caring and qualified VA responders standing by 24/7 with the Veterans Crisis Line at 1-800-243-8255 or via text at 838-255.